Guardian from this morning, 14 pages.
Julian believes that if you overthrow secrecy in the world, you will overthrow the corrupt political establishments that are oppressing everybody.
We don't see any difference in the White House's response to this case to the other groups that we have exposed. For the internet generation, this is our challenge and this is our time.
Over 20 years ago, the Berlin Wall came down, and it marked the end of the Cold War between two superpowers. Now there's a new battle that's being waged for control of information. Its front lines aren't brick and mortar walls, they're firewalls. Its weapons are computers, not missiles. And its warriors, hackers, activists, even anarchists. It's an epic struggle for state secrets between institutions and individuals. And at the center of this war is Julian Assange.
My function in WikiLeaks is to take all the heat.
The 39-year-old Australian founder of WikiLeaks has risen from obscurity to lead a whistleblowing insurgency.
The state has asserted its authority by surveilling, monitoring, and regimenting all of us, all the while hiding behind cloaks of security and opaqueness.
Armed with a virtual army of volunteers, Assange has taken aim at corporations and nations.
The material exposes an extraordinary range of abuses.
Exposing secrets that have helped fuel anger and revolt in the Middle East. Drawing the ire of the most powerful government in the world. And galvanizing a global following of cyber warriors ready to fight.
We feel obligated to step out in WikiLeaks' defense, because if WikiLeaks goes down, then that leaves very bad implications for the rest of us.
A maverick and a game changer, he's also under attack for his own behavior.
He's taken aim at his own foot and shot it.
Assange actually just arrived at the courthouse. You can see him, and he's going to come right through this gated area into the courthouse right now. That's my first glimpse of Julian Assange. This is one of the most intimate portraits yet of Julian Assange.
All this lead, how far will his group go? Locations of weapons? Absolutely. For Channel 4
Thanks,
News.
Stephen. Thanks. Every gun pointed at me. And he is person number 21.
Rare, candid moments captured by Australian journalist Mark Davis, who spent months traveling with the enigmatic leader of WikiLeaks.
He went from that kind of hobo character, if you like, into a rock star.
You followed him for months, spending time on the road with him. What's he like?
I think in private, he's actually a very charming guy when he relaxes, and it comes in flashes. You know, he has that sort of intense kind of computer nerd sort of mind, but when he eases off on that, he's very funny, droll.
Well, my voice will get sexier and sexier, you know, as the day goes on.
Nomadic and secretive, like the hero of a spy novel.
See, he's seeing this whole thing as some kind of a, I don't know, weird James Bond kind of thriller. He believes that everyone's constantly being tapped and followed.
At his core, Assange is a hacker, an outsider mining secrets that are supposed to be off limits. His outsider persona has its roots in an unusual nomadic childhood. This is Magnetic Island, a place of exotic wildlife and untouched beauty off the coast of Australia. A place Julian Assange once called home. But as a boy, he was often on the move. Assange claims he attended 36 different schools. Julian's bohemian mother, Christine, and his stepfather together ran a traveling theater company.
I really enjoyed this as a child until I was about 10, and then we had a sort of a mixed experience.
A life on the move turned into a life on the run. After his mother fled a troubled relationship, there were difficult years. But Assange seems to relish his unconventional childhood.
In fact, when I speak to people and they tell me that they spent all their life in some city, I am horrified for them and think, oh, you poor thing. I mean, how did you survive?
Eventually, Julian and his mother settled outside of Melbourne.
I had a horse. I sold this horse and bought a computer, and I was fascinated.
For Assange, it becomes a portal into an entirely new world. He joins a group of hackers known as international subversives, and under the screen name Mendax, he begins to tap into top secret networks, including the Pentagon. By the time he was 20, Assange was a sophisticated computer hacker.
And this was before there was public access to the internet. This was an incredibly intellectually liberating thing to go out and explore the world with your mind.
But authorities would eventually bust the young Assange. In 1991, he was charged with 31 counts of hacking and related crimes. After a lengthy legal battle, he walked away with only a fine. But he had caught a glimpse inside a hidden world.
To read General's emails at the Pentagon, this, of course, was an incredible thrill.
That fascination would grow into a mission to change the world.
The times we are going through at the moment constitute a generational challenge.
A mission that would expose some of America's most closely guarded secrets. As a teenager, Julian Assange believed he had the right to hack into any computer network that interested him.
That needs to be thought about, and then it needs to be set up.
But his ambition grew from cracking codes.
This is the event I was talking about.
To helping whistleblowers and dissenters anonymously divulge inside secrets.
So when people have this information, they can behave differently, choose to support something or not.
His cause, nothing less than a new world order, where nations and corporations could no longer hide corruption and injustice. With a network of secure servers, in 2007, Assange launches a website for whistleblowers, where secret documents can be released to the public. He calls it WikiLeaks.
I hack people's minds. I get people within those organizations to release their material for a just cause.
I went to Berlin to meet one of the early WikiLeaks insiders and one of the few people who's worked closely with Assange.
It's a really strange place.
Daniel Domscheit-Berg became WikiLeaks spokesman.
I picked a pseudonym, which was Daniel Schmidt, named after my cat. So,
Named after your cat?
yeah, my cat is Mr. Schmidt.
Assume names and secret server locations. Standard Wiki operating procedure. Assange himself never in one place too long.
When I met him, he was notoriously difficult to track down. There's not a lot of people that are around him for a long time. They play a purpose at a point in time and then move on.
He's a very smart person, very intelligent. He doesn't really care about what other people think of him. He's actually just his very own character. And that was kind of appealing.
What was it about WikiLeaks that appealed to you?
I thought that exposing such secrets, exposing immoral stuff that people are trying to hide from the public eye, that this actually is just a very simple but genius idea.
Armed with a global troop of supporters, Assange sifted through secrets protected by a hidden network of servers. He was on a mission to change the world, one leak at a time, starting in Kenya. After a violent, disputed election in 2007, WikiLeaks posted a report that revealed hundreds of killings at the hands of Kenyan police. The expose put WikiLeaks on the map, earning them an award from the human rights group Amnesty International. There were leaks of everything from Sarah Palin's personal emails to the membership rosters of neo-Nazis. Then, WikiLeaks began to turn its spotlight on the United States.
Right.
And when the operating manual for the Guantanamo Bay prison camp was leaked, WikiLeaks published it.
So guess which camp has on a bound to defend freedom on the front of it? The defense of freedom as a value is on the front of Guantanamo Bay.
WikiLeaks soon found itself in the crosshairs of the U.S. Army. This 2008 secret counterintelligence report, ironically leaked to WikiLeaks, identified it as a threat and revealed ways to shut it down. Assange, though, remained defiant.
When we're attacked, that is usually the worst move that someone can do. Because the information is not going to disappear anytime soon.
Growing pressure drove WikiLeaks underground. 2 of its servers were moved to a James Bond-style bomb-proof bunker in Sweden. Assange went in search of a safe haven and found one in Iceland. By 2009, Iceland was a country on its knees. A banking crisis had brought it to the edge of bankruptcy, causing riots in the streets. Banks went under, and thousands lost their life savings.
Iceland was hit harder than any other country by the international banking collapse.
Enter WikiLeaks. In July of 2009, it posted a secret loan book from one of the largest failed banks, revealing risky loans to its own shareholders. The bank quickly launched a counterattack.
We got letters from the bank saying that they would attack us and they'd try and put our source in prison for a year unless we removed it. Of course, we said, no, don't be ridiculous, we're not going to remove it. We're not going to tell you who our source is.
The leak became the story across Iceland.
Gott kvöld, nú hefjast fréttir, laugardaginn 1. ágúst. Samt ekki allar þær fréttir sem við ætlum að segja ykkur.
But the bank won an injunction prohibiting RUV-TV from airing the story.
5 minutes before the news was to go to air, the news desk was injuncted.
But the network had another card to play, directing the viewers to the WikiLeaks website.
Allir geta nálgast þau á vefsíðunni wikileaks.org, wikileaks.org.
So we had tens of thousands of Icelanders descending on us to get this material.
The expose made Assange and WikiLeaks local heroes, pushing the government to pass some of the strongest press protections in the world. Iceland became a haven for whistleblowers and WikiLeaks. In a small apartment in Reykjavik, Assange and his team began working on a secret, their most explosive yet.
He locks the door, we put the chain on, and he types all these passwords into his laptop, and he starts playing this film. And I'd never seen anything like that in my life.
Roger, I'll get you in constraint. Clear. Firing.
Iraq 2007. U.S. military might on display. An Apache helicopter camera capturing raw images of combat and voices of war. Video kept hidden until someone leaked it to Julian Assange.
Roger, building destroyed. Used with 3 Hellfire missiles.
In a daring move, he crossed into enemy territory, Washington, D.C., to release the video.
We have a mission to promote political reforms by releasing suppressed information.
Individuals with weapons.
Assange placed a George Orwell quote at the beginning and titled the video Collateral Murder. What did you think of Julian Assange titling this video Collateral Murder?
Julian Assange has an ideological point to make, a political agenda to push, and he doesn't understand what he's talking about.
I met retired Brigadier General Mark Kimmett at the CNN studios in Washington, D.C. He's read the military's report, and together we went through some of the video.
Roger, I just estimate there's about 20 of them.
It is my understanding that this unit on the ground had been engaged in combat probably for the last couple of hours.
We got an RPG. All right, we got a guy with an RPG. I'm gonna fire.
This clip is where they believe they identify an RPG. It turns out, as we know now, that that was a long-lens telephoto camera held by a Reuters journalist. You can see him as he peeks around the corner there.
Keep shoot.
That Reuters photographer, his assistant, and the men around them were all gunned down.
Oh yeah, look at those dead bastards.
This photographer shouldn't have been walking around with an instrument that looks very much like a weapon.
Is the blame on the photographer, or is it a causal series of mistakes made by the crew there that led to the ultimate negative consequences?
Warfare is not perfect. There are mistakes that are sometimes made. He shares much of the blame for what happened here.
I want to move to the van video.
Where's that van at? Right down there by the body. Okay.
And what you see is a van that's coming to help grab some of the wounded people on the ground. The Apache crew asked for permission to engage.
Come on, let us shoot.
Again, this is an active battlefield. That van could have other fighters inside of it with weapons. Those fighters could put our soldiers at risk, could kill those soldiers that they're fighting.
Come on.
We can see in this video that the young pilots in the Apache helicopters have become debased in their character.
Oh yeah, look at that, right through the windshield.
They are playing video games with real human lives and are looking for excuses to kill people.
It turned out that there were children inside of the van.
Oh, it's their fault for bringing their kids to a battle. That's right.
Sir, as you know, I have almost a decade in naval special warfare. You're obviously 30 years in the Army. Soldier to sailor, ground pounder to ground pounder. Should these men have exercised more restraint?
I don't think so. What we have here, from everything that I have seen, is that they followed the proper procedures.
So if they did everything by the book, is there something wrong with the book?
I don't think so. The book doesn't have every scenario, doesn't have every possible outcome.
Secret U.S. military video, a stunning WikiLeaks exclusive. But who's responsible for leaking it, and why? Military investigators soon point the finger at one of their own, Private First Class Bradley Manning, who's since been arrested. But Manning may have never come to their attention if not for this man. We're on our way to meet Adrian Lameau, who's the former computer hacker who turned Bradley Manning into the authorities. And Lameau is kind of an elusive character. He screens all his phone calls, he changes emails, he doesn't respond to messages. But he had one condition for our interview today, and that's that his location had to remain completely anonymous. Adrian, what's with all the cloak and dagger stuff?
There are people that are going beyond words in their opposition to my cooperation with the government in this case. And I just want to be able to sleep soundly at night.
Bradley Manning first approaches Lameau by sending him an email.
Manning is essentially opened by introducing himself, saying he was an intelligence analyst at Forward Operating Base Hammer in Iraq, just outside of Baghdad.
Lameau and Manning then begin chatting extensively online. Lameau says he provided the chat logs to the website Wired.com, who eventually published about a quarter of the transcripts. And during one of those chats, Manning asked Lameau, if you had unprecedented access to classified networks 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 8+ months, what would you do? Alarmed, Lameau contacts U.S. officials. The convicted computer hacker says he took action because his own strong belief in government transparency is not without limits.
Where I draw the line is when it comes to the point that it can cause real and articulable harm.
We tried to get in contact with Manning's attorney, but he never returned our calls. In the online chats, Lameau, now a government informant, asked Manning how he got the information out. Manning explains that he copied classified files and video onto a CD that he had labeled Lady Gaga. No one suspected a thing. Kinda sad. In their chats, Manning mentions Julian Assange. I mean, I'm a high-profile source, and I've developed a relationship with Assange. But Assange continually denies knowing Manning.
We don't know if this guy is our source or not.
Manning's confessions to Lameau have landed him at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Facing a possible life sentence, Manning is accused of leaking hundreds of thousands of U.S. secrets. Secrets he allegedly gave to Julian Assange. Soon, the press would pick up the setting.
So I then started running around the Guardian building saying, this is the biggest story on the planet. We have to get hold of this information.
Julian Assange's collateral murder video did not spark the outrage he had hoped for. And now, his alleged source, Private Bradley Manning, was in custody. Journalist Mark Davis was with Assange in the summer of 2010.
I believe he was a little bit paranoid, but I'm not surprised that he was in a state of high anxiety and highly security conscious.
Oh, MIRFD.
Security conscious because Assange had another weapon in his arsenal. A secret database of U.S. government documents from the war in Afghanistan.
Injury on the Danish and the...
Assange was more and more focused on what he saw as abuses within the U.S. government. Now he believed he had evidence of actual war crimes. Does he operate as if he's constantly being followed, constantly being watched?
Yes, because he probably is. You know, this information was known. I mean, essentially, important people knew he had this.
More surveillance around him than almost anybody else in the world.
One of the people on Assange's trail was Nick Davis, an investigative journalist from the Guardian newspaper in London. He had read about Manning's alleged leak to WikiLeaks and sensed a big story. So you started looking for Julian Assange?
He was lying very low, so it took me 4 or 5 days to find out where he was and make contact.
At a cafe in Brussels, Davis finally came face to face with Assange.
So my pitch was, let's create an alliance between The Guardian and other news organizations so that you get serious impact and so that it becomes impossible to stop us, because we're not just in one jurisdiction where the government or the courts might block us, we'll be scattered. And he rapidly locked on to that idea.
Straight out of a spy novel, Davis headed back to London with a secret passcode Assange had written on a napkin. 1 day later, he had the database.
Okay, so now this is actually pretty good, right?
Assange invited the New York Times and German newspaper Der Spiegel to join them. In an unprecedented collaboration, the 3 newspapers began to sift through the thousands of documents. So I've come here to London, to the headquarters of the Guardian newspaper, to meet up with some of the journalists who were holed up for weeks in a bunker with Julian Assange as they sifted through the secret cables and documents that were eventually to become known as the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs.
He is.
This is the famous bunker?
Yeah, it is.
David Lee is another investigative journalist with The Guardian.
These are some of the headlines that came out of the war logs, actually, the first batch,
Yes.
you know, about Afghan and Iraq. And they are...
What were your impressions of Assange the man when you first met him?
He didn't behave like earthlings, you know. He would stay up all night, tapping away at his laptop, and then suddenly he'd keel over and his leather jacket buttoned up to the neck and, like, crash and go to sleep where he lay.
The more than 90,000 documents revealed a side of the Afghan war hidden from public view.
We started coming across really interesting information about collusion between the Pakistani intelligence service and the Taliban. So this was rich stuff that was buried in this database.
If you want to see it on the map, then you can always use the other one.
But there was growing tension with Assange.
All of us came across material which was clearly likely to lead to the death of innocent civilians if we published it. All of us had the experience of bringing this to his attention and being told by him, in effect, if an Afghan civilian helps coalition forces, then they deserve to die.
Does Assange understand that there are flesh and blood consequences to the actions of, say, releasing secret documents?
He has to have it explained to him. He's not a person who's very high on empathy with other humans.
Finally, in the last few days before we published, he got it. And he made a rather crude attempt to make the material which he was publishing on the website safe by withholding 15,000 documents out of the total of 92,000. But it wasn't enough.
That's a direct quote. 57.
On the eve of the launch date, names of Afghan civilians were still in WikiLeaks documents.
We go at 10 p.m. London time tomorrow.
On July 25th, 2010, WikiLeaks released over 70,000 classified documents on the Afghan war.
The material exposes an extraordinary range of abuses.
And all three newspapers published stories about the war logs.
Within 48 hours, other news organizations were finding material on the WikiLeaks website which clearly was dangerous. And that meant that the political damage was done. His moral authority was reduced. He'd made a terrible tactical mistake.
The release set off a firestorm in Washington.
The battlefield consequences of the release of these documents are potentially severe and dangerous for our troops, our allies, and Afghan partners.
Massive leak of secret files exposes true Afghan war.
There's a dozen camera trucks outside. That's surprising.
No, I knew if we did our work right, it'd have this effect. I knew this material was serious.
Well, you've said that this is the most comprehensive history of a war.
Why specifically the focus on print?
Are there any circumstances in which you wouldn't publish information?
Julian Assange finally had the world's attention.
Really? I've seen Twitter has just gone off the roof.
He went from that kind of hobo character, if you like, into a rock star. It's like having a hit movie overnight, and suddenly everyone wants to see you.
But that attention would come with a price. The press began to grill him.
Where, though, will all this lead? How far will his group go? Locations of weapons? Absolutely. For Channel 4 News.
Stephen thinks every gun pointed at me.
Still, Assange seemed confident he was beyond the reach of governments.
But I'm untouchable now in this country.
Untouchable, for now. But his star was about to be tarnished. This time, the leaks would be about him. By the summer of 2010, Julian Assange's war on secrecy is in high gear.
The course of the war needs to change. This is The Guardian.
The Afghan war logs are making headlines around the world.
It's one damn thing after another.
And making Assange famous.
I'm a combative person, so I like crushing bastards.
But now, he is at the center of a scandal. The Swedish government had requested extradition in order to question him about allegations of sexual assault. 2 Swedish women have come forward accusing Assange of aggressive or unwanted sexual advances, which, under Swedish law, can constitute rape. As yet, no charges have been filed against Assange, and he strongly denies the allegations.
Surveillance events have been a bit more intense.
Undistracted by what he calls a smear campaign, Assange begins working around the clock on what will become his biggest leak yet.
They bring in this AC-130 gunship.
In October 2010, WikiLeaks releases the motherlode, nearly 400,000 secret U.S. documents on the Iraq War.
The start of the Iraq War involved very serious lies, which were repeated and amplified.
The stories reveal troubling new details about the war. Numerous cases of torture and abuse of Iraqi prisoners by Iraqi police and soldiers, and cases where U.S. troops killed innocent civilians. But this time, Assange censors documents.
We have redacted everything except for things that we have cleared by hand. And That approach has left black ink all over the material.
From your name being. But that doesn't ease the fears of many, including General Kimmett. Julian Assange has constantly put forward that nobody has been attacked or killed due to any of the disclosures from WikiLeaks. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think a lot of our soldiers have been put in harm's way. There is a reason and a purpose for operational security, for protecting our tactics, techniques, and procedures. We don't want to give an advantage to our enemy that can be used against our soldiers in combat.
And the steady leak of U.S. secrets doesn't end there. 1 month later, WikiLeaks publishes diplomatic cables. The U.S. government fires back. Secretary Clinton, who only months before had championed internet freedom, is now on the warpath.
We are taking aggressive steps to hold responsible those who stole this information.
So what has been the government's counterattack to WikiLeaks? The CIA has established the WikiLeaks Task Force, known within the agency as the WTF, a cheeky acronym within cyberspace. And additionally, the Justice Department has subpoenaed the Twitter accounts of WikiLeaks supporters and is rumored to be marshaling an investigation that could lead to the extradition of Assange to the U.S. Then, a series of blows. Amazon.com kicks WikiLeaks off its website. PayPal bars donations. And Sweden issues an arrest warrant. On December 7th, 2010, Assange is put in jail. And in an ironic twist, a leak exposes the lurid details of the sexual assault allegations against Assange.
By sheer fluke, somebody I had dealt with in the past contacted me and said, guess what? I've got the whole preliminary police file from the Swedish investigation into these sexual assaults. Are you interested?
Nick Davis, a journalist with The Guardian newspaper who worked closely with Assange on the Afghan war logs, was given a copy of the leaked report.
So what are we going to do? We put it in the paper. That's what journalists do.
What was Julian's reaction?
He went berserk. His attitude expressed through his lawyer while we were writing this piece was that we should suppress this information because he had been a source for us, for The Guardian, and therefore we owed it to him to suppress it.
CNN made several requests for another interview with Assange, but got no response. Assange's attorney tells CNN that he asked for a delay in publication because Assange was in prison. But The Guardian maintains Assange was given several days to respond. In rhetoric, Assange is a proponent of transparency, but he doesn't seem to walk that walk. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true, certainly. Efficiently.
Daniel Domscheit-Berg, then a WikiLeaks insider, says Assange kept him and others in the dark.
He just said it's not your business, and next question. And that is one of the major reasons why I and a few others actually left the project, because that's a contradiction.
So this is an example.
Leak after leak, Assange's platform grows, but his relationships are fraying. Domscheit-Berg and others leave WikiLeaks.
You can see a pattern. He alienates most of the reporters and editors he works with. He alienates most of the people who are working for WikiLeaks.
A man who spent most of his life on the move now is forced to stay in one place and face the accusations against him. Coming up, in prison, but not alone, cyber warriors in support of Assange go on the attack.
We had the whole Project Avenge Assange. We feel obligated to do something about it. Reach out to other people and tell them that this is their fight as well.
After 9 days in prison, Julian Assange emerges into a crush of supporters and media.
Well, it's great to smell fresh air of London again.
Vowing to continue the leaks and fight the sexual assault allegations against him.
I hope to continue my work and continue to protest my innocence in this matter.
By now, WikiLeaks has become radioactive. PayPal, Visa, MasterCard have all cut its financial lifeline. But a secretive global force of cyber hacktivists begins to mobilize a counterattack. They call themselves Anonymous. So we've actually been trying to get an interview with a member of Anonymous for weeks, and we finally tracked someone down who's willing to talk to us. And these guys are committed to the cause of defending WikiLeaks. So we're Skyping now with Base and Chris, two members of Anonymous. Base, what is Anonymous?
Anonymous is an internet subculture based around anonymity. It's the freedom of thought, the freedom of speech, and the freedom of information taken to a logical extreme.
Why do you have to remain anonymous?
You have the government agencies after us. We have other people that don't appreciate what we're doing after us. So it would not be very good if our identities were exposed.
Why are you guys such ardent supporters of WikiLeaks?
They expose secrets, transparency, freedom of speech, freedom of information on the internet. And that resonates with us.
Corrupt governments of the world. We are Anonymous.
In December 2010, Anonymous launched Operation Payback.
In the beginning of Operation Payback, we went after PayPal, Visa, MasterCard, and eventually Amazon, because they were the ones that publicly withdrew funding and support from WikiLeaks, especially PayPal, who actually held funds.
Anonymous unleashed a cyber attack.
DDoSing is distributed denial of service attack. Essentially, you send so many requests to a server that it shuts down,
temporarily bringing down some of the websites. Do you think the government can stop groups like you or WikiLeaks?
They're not going to stop WikiLeaks. Even if the government were to take down WikiLeaks, they'd essentially be martyring WikiLeaks, and 100 other sites would spring up. The only thing they can really do is turn the internet off. And even then, that didn't stop the people in Egypt.
In some sense, the WikiLeaks phenomenon is unstoppable. Part of a new reality where whistleblowers can go global and make governments quake. Where a leak can add fuel to a revolution. But governments will fight back. The U.S. Justice Department has Assange in its sights. Rumor has it, building a case for conspiracy.
If I am a conspirator to commit espionage, then all these other media organizations and the principal journalists in them are also conspirators to commit espionage.
Thank you. For now, Assange remains in the UK under house arrest, fighting the Swedish extradition request. In February, I traveled there for his first hearing. All right, we've come about 45 minutes outside of central London to the Woolwich Crown Court. Like everywhere Assange goes, he seems to draw a huge media crowd. There's basically representatives from every major media organization in the world here covering just to get a glimpse of him as he walks from his car to the courthouse. Assange actually just arrived, and he's going to come right through this gated area into the courthouse.
A black box has been applied to my life. And on the outside of that black box has been written the word rape.
He's at the center of attention, but still very much alone.
He is an island, and he's become an island. The circle's become very small, and because he no longer trusts anybody, he's been betrayed by people that have come into that circle.
To some, Assange is a clear danger, a self-appointed judge of good and evil.
Julian Assange has this self-proclaimed mantle that he has put around himself, that he can be the judge for what governments can do and can't do. And that's a very dangerous assertion on the part of any single individual.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Politicians have taken aim. On Fox News, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich calls Assange a terrorist.
Information warfare is warfare, and Julian Assange is engaged in warfare. Information terrorism, which leads to people getting killed, is terrorism, and Julian Assange is engaged in terrorism.
Hero or villain, Julian Assange has created a powerful platform.
The more people get to read what really goes on in the world, the more chance they have of educating themselves about realities. And I think realities are what we need.
Even some of Assange's critics are following in his footsteps. Daniel Domscheit-Berg has launched a new whistleblowing website, OpenLeaks. So what is the future of WikiLeaks?
It has set something in motion all over the world that cannot be stopped anymore. And it has carried this debate of what is secrecy, what must be secret and what must not be secret, into the living rooms and the 8 o'clock news, to people that never heard about this before and never thought about it before.
Julian Assange, the self-appointed champion of free speech, has dared to reveal the secrets of both dictators and democracies. He dropped a nuclear warhead of information onto the world stage. The final chapter of the WikiLeaks saga has yet to be written. Its fate is inextricably linked to the fate of the man at the center of this radioactive storm. But for now, Julian Assange's war against secrecy rages on.